Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Ecosystem Experience. I'm Kieran McKenzie, and I'm super excited for this conversation. I've even got my second cup of coffee for the day on the fly. I'm talking to somebody who is incredibly well known in the community. He is the grandfather. No, wait. He is the godfather of martech. I'll get that right there, sir. I won't age you too much. Mr. Scott Brinker, welcome to the Ecosystem Experience.
Thank you. Yeah, delighted to be here. Grandfather of martech. I might actually adopt that.
Yeah, well, there we go. It is so wonderful, Scott, to have you on the call. You are one of those characters that has been around various ecosystems for a long time. And while we haven't directly overlapped, you and your work is someone I have looked to at different times. The amount of content you've put out, reports, blog posts, and one thing I really want to spend a bit of time on is mapping the industry. So let me just start with the first basic question. Why devote so much of your time to mapping that MarTech ecosystem?
You know, that's a question I ask myself on a very frequent basis. All right. So when it started, which was, my goodness, 14 years ago, it was a lot more modest in size. The first graphic I put together had around 150 technologies, which at the time actually seemed like a lot. And the primary reason I put it together was, I'd started this blog, Chief Martech, that was talking about how technology was increasingly just becoming like a core capability that marketing teams needed to develop. And to be honest, even back then in 2008, 2009, there was just a lot of resistance to that. Like the history of marketing and IT software, they were like just opposite ends of the career spectrum, And so there were a lot of like senior marketers who felt like somehow like engaging, in technology was almost like a betrayal, to like marketing as they knew it. And so one of the reasons I put that graph together was I'm like, being in the trenches, working as a technologist, supporting a lot of marketing teams, I'm like, you actually are using a lot of technology. And probably as the senior leader, you might not even realize how much technology you have, but it is infiltrating almost every facet, of marketing. And so the whole point of putting that graphic together was essentially almost like exhibit A in a case to be like, you might want to actually think about investing in the talent and organizational capital around this. And I will say that graphics served that purpose. It started to spark a lot of conversations about people like, oh, wow, I guess we really do have a lot of martech. What was unexpected about it was, I'd go back every year to like update it. And oh my God, like it was growing exponentially for a number of years, like 300 to 900 to 2000 to 4000.
Wow.
I mean, it's certainly not anything that I would have expected.
Yeah, right. Yep. It's interesting that speed of growth as well. And I mean, when we're seeing it today, right? The whole vibe code iteration, the fact that anybody can build things. So we're going to see even further proliferation of these things. What is there any surprising trends though that you've seen during that growth? Is there a particular space that's growing faster than others, or a particular type of player in the ecosystem?
One of the things that's always been fascinating, because every year we would get asked like, oh, well, where is the innovate? Like, which are the categories with the most innovation?
Most innovation, yep.
And the truth is, like, almost every year there was innovation happening in every single category. Now there's certain like meta trends that come and play. Like, we went in through the trend of like, okay, what's going to be the support for mobile? As we started to see things like data warehouses start to become a part of the stack, what was the, way that does. Certainly here with AI, for a while people were like, should there be an AI category? I'm like, well, kind of feels like AI is getting baked into everything. So while you see certain like meta trends, the diffusion of how that innovation, it's almost throughout all of marketing. I think if there's maybe one myth about that landscape that, could dispel is people often look at that and say like, oh, well, I don't understand. Isn't this going to consolidate? In
Ah,
general, it seems like common business sense here that,
yes,
you
yeah,
get a whole bunch of competitors over time, they consolidate. And the thing is, they do. The history of that landscape is year over year over year, we continually see significant consolidation of companies
definitely.
that get acquired, companies that go out of business or do some sort of radical pivot. The reason the landscape keeps growing is because the entrance rate of like new startups has continued to
True.
outpace the exit
Yeah,
rate, for
yeah,
those that are being consolidated. And that is something that we've never really seen in software before this. Although I will say, while maybe martech was the first, sector where we saw that explosion in that dynamic, it is by no means the only one. In fact, actually now like fintech and,
yeah, yeah.
obviously engineering tech, cybersecurity tech, actually all of those landscapes are larger than the martech landscape, if
True,
that isn't
true.
frightening enough.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's fascinating. Actually, on that, I find myself thinking, I wonder how many other folks have been inspired by your work as well to build their own maps. I'm not necessarily aware of big maps of particular industries. Yours is probably that strength, but I know for myself, back in the cloud accounting days, we took inspiration from your work to say, actually, why don't we map our own ecosystem so that even just our own field teams or our own other partners in the market had a better appreciation. And again, we saw the same sort of trends coming through of the speed of innovation. And even actually now at Atlassian, or when I was at Atlassian, that same sort of thing, the speed of innovation, then the acquisitions, the condensing of that community. But there's always that growth coming back through. One thing I do want to ask though, and we did see this significantly in the Atlassian ecosystem, is there's the public ecosystem and then there's the private ecosystem or the quiet one. In the Atlassian world, a lot of customers build their own side of things, or maybe solution or integration partners build things for a subset of their customers, but it never goes public. Do you think there is a dark web? Well, maybe I shouldn't say it that way, but a hidden ecosystem
The dark
behind
ecosystem.
yeah, a dark martech world where we think, oh,
uh,
let's not unpack that. Yeah, that could go bad.
Yeah,
Uh,
not a negative thing, but a
yeah, yeah, yeah.
100% absolutely true. And it's certainly like the categories of customers doing their own things. There's the category of solutions providers, consultants, systems integrators, building things that are a little bit more custom. We even saw there were, in HubSpot, while there's a certain number of companies that became officially listed in the marketplace, we saw significantly more that would nonetheless build the integration. And they might not list it for a variety of reasons. I mean, maybe on the less appealing side is maybe we should have probably done a better job of the wayfinders and helping them on board to get into the marketplace. But sometimes it's because, yeah, startups are testing something, they're not ready to like, go at scale with it. It is definitely something where the ecosystem is much much larger in most of these platforms than what you see officially in the market.
Yeah, and I think that's the part that those of us in the industry, it never really surprises us. But I know for myself, when I talk to people who are outside the ecosystems, there's sort of two big myths. One, a lot of apps or players in the marketplace are a couple of people in a garage or a shed or a bedroom, insert stereotype here, and they're not real businesses, when actually quite a lot of them are very successful and quite large businesses, or it's nascent and tiny and they don't realize actually the number of customers who have built mission critical, business critical workflows, processes over the scale and size of that ecosystem, right? And so it's data sharing, it's process sharing, it's workflow sharing, and all that sort of richness over top. It's always surprising how we get into that space. So on that question then of things being public and things not being public, and how you find things. Take us back to those early days when you didn't have ChatGPT deep research to help you. How on earth did you map this or even start that? I'm imagining there was hours and hours of spreadsheet and notes and work. Take us on that journey.
Yes, yes, it was. So again, like the methodology that I started with, and then what it sort of had to evolve to over time, just given scale, it changed a bit. But for even starting with those first few versions, it was you know, I at the time I was running a what we would now call an ISV company. We had created a SaaS platform for interactive content. It would integrate to things like Salesforce, Marketo. We were hoping in early days to integrate with HubSpot. That's part of how I ended up coming to HubSpot, as I started as an ISV. But so part of like what I was trying to do, I was the chief technology officer for that company, so we're chief product officer. I was just trying to understand like what are the categories of things that marketers are using. Which ones do we need to make sure that we interact with? Just be able to almost from like a product marketing perspective, be able to place ourselves in the pantheon, of other tools. And so that's really what sort of gave me the foundation of just thinking of like, okay, well, what are the general kinds of categories of things? And then I took a little bit of an obsessive thing for like each category. I'm like, well, pretend I am a truly like obsessive compulsive buyer. And I just want to like search for like what is every possible solution I could have here in like, search engine optimization tools. And so it's a lot of Google searches. It's a lot looking at, conferences, who's exhibiting there, a lot of visiting people's websites, trying to suss out, is this a real thing? And so that it was a lot of hours,
Mhm.
but it was manageable to a point. And
Right.
then, yeah, particularly these past few years, as it like crossed 10,000, I collaborate with a fellow named Frans Dreamersma, who's based out of the Netherlands. And he and I have like a small army of people who use both a combination of like URL investigation and AI categorization and constantly like rechecking these things. And we get submissions from collaborators all over the world. And then how do you validate those? And yeah, it's become a pretty large scale enterprise. And if you're wondering like why,
Yeah,
I actually wonder that almost every every year myself. I'm like, is this still useful to anybody?
well, and that's the thing because I was thinking in my own world, like it's easy enough for us where we've been the vendor, so to speak. We can pull on our own database, right? We can pull on a known set of information. At least then you've got a foundation to work from. You were working broader than just a vendor. You were across everything. So I can totally understand why it was, and now it's become such a big thing. How do you know where to draw the line as to what information though is important, right? Because yeah, logos and categorization is nice, but if I'm the marketer and I'm making decisions around, you know, these are the sort of tools we should be evaluating. These are the sort of tools we're looking at. In the enterprise world, I'm also then looking for compliance regulations and stamps of approval and SOC 2 and GDPR and this sort of thing. Are you going to that level as well? Or how do you draw the line as to what level of information you bring into it?
Yeah, definitely not. Like this is in no way competing up against Gartner or Forrester, any of these folks. I would say this is not a vendor analysis exercise so much as it is an industry analyst exercise where I
Mm,
mean if I think of I mean maybe once upon a time when it was small there
yeah,
was
yeah,
maybe some legitimate value of trying to discover companies and categories and vendors that we've long since passed that point where you have a little microscope to like track those down. The primary value I think we have right now is certainly the aggregate statistics. Just even being able to like talk empirically about where is their growth, where is their contraction. We do enough sort of depth of like understanding like, okay, what are the size of these companies? Do we have any sort of revenue data? What sort of ratings and reviews are they showing up on things like the G2 site? Where are
yeah.
they headquartered? Where are these companies like coming from? Because they're not all coming from Silicon Valley. And then being able to even like do a little bit of comparison, year over year of how those things are evolving. um there is value to that industry data, but it is by no means like a vendor analysis blueprint of like, yeah, if you want to make a decision about like, okay, which marketing automation platform should I buy? This landscape has absolutely no value to you whatsoever in that mission. I'm sorry.
Other than giving you 6 names to look at or 25 names to look at. But yeah, you're going to be going to a HubSpot or an Atlassian or an AWS marketplace to get that deeper detail. And then you're going to be talking to reps and that sort of thing for sure. But I can definitely appreciate where from a thought leadership and a market pulse, of what's going on in that space that's allowing people to understand the growth, the opportunity, that sort of thing, phenomenally powerful. What's your vision running forward from now? So you've been doing it for a great number of years now. As you said, it is getting this immense size and scale now, and you've got this army of people supporting. What's your vision 2 years from now, 5 years from now?
Hopefully, I get paroled at some point. I don't know. We'll see. To me, there's almost like a bifurcation of how I've been thinking about this, which is I still think so if you think of that as a long tail, and there's a relatively small number of companies in the head. There's maybe a few hundred companies that I would consider being in the torso where they've got, say, maybe greater than 100 million ARR. They're scaled. And then you got this just massive long tail
Long
of
tail.
very, very small
Huge.
companies, some of which aspire to become large companies, some of which don't. Actually, they're
Yeah,
fine being a specialist
correct.
thing in
Yeah,
an ecosystem.
yeah.
Um, I think there is a lot of opportunity still to do a deeper job of looking at the companies in the head and the torso. And so that might be something I'd be curious to like, because again, like even when you were raising questions about, well, what does this mean? Like who's supporting which compliance things? Who has an MCP server? There's some dynamics that would be very hard to evaluate 15,000 products on. But if you had like maybe 500, and you're like, okay, these are the largest 500, and we're going to do a deeper analysis of those. Again, not so much to try and like necessarily help you with a selection process, but to even from an industry perspective, just get a sense of like a deeper level, of how the technology is evolving. So that's one thing I'd be interested in. But the other side of it is, and this is where we started. You were talking about like, all these customer developers and SIs who build things. Oh man, my goodness, with all these AI coding tools, um, I think we are seeing like a significant shift where commercial software, don't get me wrong, commercial software is not going away, but the amount of custom software that
Yeah,
businesses are now going to be in a position to like build to tailor to their specific needs, I think that's going to explode. And I think it is going to sort of change the dynamics of, that sort of build versus buy
yeah,
equation.
yeah. Yeah, it's
So
it's interesting. That's a topic I've started talking with a number of people on is the changing the changing behavior and demographics, I think, across ecosystems of it used to be that you're right. You did have to have the Makedo to plug in to be able to do your email campaigns and bits and pieces. Whereas today, well, you might still have a platform that sends, but you might be using an N8N on top of some sort of MCP, on top of some other thing that a chat GPT has layered up together for you. I remember sitting with our partner advisory council not too long ago, and I pulled up Bolt in front of the team, and I said to them, "What are you doing with AI in your businesses?" And of course, I got the rote responses. Oh yeah, we're looking at it from a product point of view. We're looking at it from how it delights our customers. And I said, no, 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 I'm not actually interested in that at all. Pulled Bolt up, and in a couple of quick sentences, asked it for a Jira tool that could log in and pull out all my stuff and build a report, this sort of thing. And it did a surprisingly good job with the UI and everything, or just within 5 minutes. Although I must admit, and you'll know this from being on stage, when you're in front of a room of people, 5 minutes is an inordinate amount of time to sit and wait for something to do something in the background. But anyway, it came up. My takeaway to them was when a customer can do 60% of the perceived value of your product in a vibe coding tool, is there enough in the rest of your product for them to continue buying your product? And I find myself listening to what you were saying there and thinking the same sort of thing. These customers are saying, I can actually now build 60%. 60% is good enough. On the flip side, that scares the living heck out of me because security, data sovereignty, data access, all of these sorts of things, right? Do you think we're going to see a different type of consolidation across these ecosystems? Maybe it is that these tools, that 60% sort of concept will come to play and we'll see a ripple effect of people buying or not buying apps like they have in the past?
Yeah. So I sort of think of this in two ways. So one is one of my favorite inspirations around ecosystems and technology in general was Clay Christensen, and his model of disruptive innovation. you know, He'd studied this, over decades, and this pattern he recognized that what makes an innovation disruptive is you have some existing market that's served by these very high end, very sophisticated, advanced solutions and capabilities. What makes something disruptive is it comes in and it doesn't even have a prayer of solving any of those advanced use cases. Instead, it solves a lot of these much simpler, lower value use cases that none of the high end solutions, it wasn't even worth them trying to solve those. It just wouldn't have been economically viable, the complexity, and so you get these people. I mean, like the classic example is, with, digital cameras or, hey, this isn't going to replace professional, cameras.
Of
Well,
course not,
you're
never.
right, it's not. But now all of a sudden, the fact that I could have this in my iPhone and take photos, it
Yeah,
was a whole new market of people that were able to access, as Christensen would have called them, they were underserved, markets. And that's how I sort of look at a lot of these vibe coding platforms right now. Is you're not going to use Bolt or Replit or Lovable to build your own Salesforce.com. I joke. I'm pretty sure Salesforce doesn't want to rebuild their own, Salesforce.com anymore. But what you are going to get is you are going to get this sales ops person, who kind of wanted this custom little dashboard of, hey, could I pull these things from here? And for them, that use case is something that wouldn't have been worth. I mean, no commercial product would have been tailoring something for them. The IT team would have been like, yeah, if you want to file a ticket, we'll get to that in, 6 months. And if this person can basically activate that and solve their particular localized pain point in a very custom way, that's incredibly powerful. And that's net
very
new
powerful.
software that just didn't ever really exist. Now, the thing about Christensen's disruptive innovation model is this is almost the trap of it, is it comes in, it solves these low end use cases. The high end use case folks aren't threatened at all. They're like, yeah, now we go ahead, man, build your own little dashboard, have fun, you know. But then over time, those technologies get better and
Yes.
better. And
Yes.
then at some point in time, you start to have this thing where it crosses the line. So I think for me, the question with vibe coding isn't, is it going to replace commercial software here in the near term? My guess is no. No, it's going to do it. It's going to help with a whole bunch of underserved use cases for the foreseeable future. But I'm also pretty confident it's going to keep getting better and better. And at some point, maybe it's a year from now, maybe it's 5 years from now, it is going to cross that line where all of a sudden, yeah, maybe actually it is better for me to just build this on.
And I love that because it democratizes and it lowers that barrier of entry so much for you, the everyday person, for want of a term, right? Just, I mean, I've seen it in myriad places where you put the right tool in front of someone who's just been wrestling with something. And it could have just been Excel. I mean, Excel is an insanely powerful tool, but a lot of people just use it as numbers in a sheet. And then when you show them a simple VLOOKUP or you show them a simple thing, and all of a sudden their eyes open up. And I'm seeing a similar sort of thing with those vibe coding tools where you're saying, in this situation, you're wrestling with X, ask the question over here, and here's the output. And they're like, oh, wait, hang on. Now I can do it. And you're right. It's not a commercially viable thing for a company to put time and effort and energy into. But for them, it's life changing, right? I do wonder, and we talked about this at Atlassian at times, is when do we skip that step as well? Where the AI platform or the tool itself actually knows. So Kieran's building a table here and there's a row of numbers in it, and it just knows automatically that this cell underneath should be a sum. And it doesn't even ask you whether you want to do it or not. It just puts it in there. I mean, that's a silly little example, but when does the AI auto suggest, good old Clippy back again, right? Like, it looks like you're writing a letter. Would you like an envelope? Um, but I wonder when things become that integrated, which then further disseminates that sort of stuff and makes it so much easier for people to build and build and build and just and solve those little pieces of the puzzle on the way through. Um, and then, as you said, suddenly you've got 10, 15 people in a company using your vibe coding tool, and then you layer in those new effects, and you're now a dashboarding tool that's there, highly bespoke, highly customized. And the opportunity there, it's going to be a very fascinating space to watch. On that, right now, you're writing a lot of AI content. And right now, today, how
Yeah,
much
literally at this exact minute. Yes.
right. Yeah, exactly. I disrupted his writing process for this conversation. How much is hype versus what's actually already shaping the ecosystem?
Yeah. Make no mistake, there is copious quantities of hype all around AI. I think the thing that is the most fascinating about this is all right. So when we say hype, almost all of us in tech, we now are trained to think of Gartner's famous hype
Yep.
curve.
Yep.
And again, the world is a little more complex than that. But in general, it kind of like it's a pattern we've just seen again and again and again. The thing that's interesting about that hype, there's two things that's interesting about that hype curve. One is, it is a curve of hype, that peaks and then valleys and then levels out. It's not actually a curve that represents the way technology improves. Technology improves almost on like a linear line that's like cutting straight through that curve. And it's sometimes we lose track of that when we think we're above it or we think we're below it. But the other thing that's interesting about it is I'm old. The hype curve used to take about 10 years to run its course between like when some sort of trigger happened, hype, valley, sort of figure it out. Okay, we plateau. Um, the thing that is really crazy here about what we're seeing in AI is we still see that sort of pattern of hype trough, figure it out, but now it's happening instead of 10 years, I don't know, give or take, it's almost like a 2-year, cadence here. I mean, like we've just seen this again and again where, something came out, with OpenAI or Anthropic or someone, you're like, well, that's cool, but it can't do X, Y, and Z. And then 3 months later, they're like, oh, yeah, now it can do X, Y, and Z. And you're like, oh, all right, but it can't do these other things, and then 6 months later, yeah, I guess it can do those too. And this is something as an industry, I think we're actually, this to me gets to the crux of why this AI moment is just so challenging for vendors,
Mm,
for brands,
mm.
for everyone, is the speed of change is something that we just as individuals and certainly as organizations, we generally don't have the mechanisms to adapt
Yeah,
at
yeah,
that speed. And it's
yeah,
almost the adaptation challenge that is much more difficult than, the specifics of the actual technology with AI itself.
yeah, yeah. It's fascinating being sitting here right now, having left Atlassian in this moment of just integrating with lots of people like yourself. Let's say 6 months from now, I'm looking for a new role. The speed at which this tech is moving, I'm sort of sitting there going, I'm not going to be on that cutting edge. I mean, the knowledge and the skills transfer, that's completely fine. I get that. But I find myself sitting there going like, how do I stay connected to the community? How do I stay in that moment? I think that's an interesting thing is to, as this stuff accelerates and gets quicker and quicker, we as people are going to have to pick and choose which parts we are spending our time, our resources, our efforts in. And I think that is actually where tools like your map allow us to say, this is an area I want to be in. Here's some emerging stuff. Oh, this is the difference from the last time the map was generated to the time now. And it allows us to fine tune where we spend some time. But I think that skill set of you don't have to keep pace with the innovation, but you do have to pick and choose where you're going to put your time and effort.
Yeah, I years ago I sort of drawn on this diagram of there's this exponential curve of the rate of technological change, and I juxtaposed up against that this more of like a logarithmic curve of organizational change, and so what you get is, this sort of like splitting apart. And I do think, I mean, it's a hand wavy sort of thing, but
Mhm,
I
mhm.
think that it actually is fairly reflective of the challenge that we have. And I came to the exact same conclusion that you did, that, okay, there's not a magic bullet here. There's no way in which like organizations are going to magically now be able to change exponentially. The two things you can do is one, um, you can actually be very strategic about, okay, which of these changes are we going to embrace, and be willing to make those hard decisions of like, there's going to be others we're going to let go because we just
Mhm.
can't do it all. And then the second thing is, this investment in becoming better as an organization of dealing with change. The way I'd frame it would be more agile, being a long term agile advocate,
Yep, yep.
like companies, and again, it's not like becoming more agile is going to make you able to change exponentially. It's simply a question of like, you're not playing this as a single player game. You are playing this as a multiplayer game in a market with competition. And if you are able to just be a little bit more agile than your competitors, frankly, that's all you need to win the game. And so
Correct,
if you be strategic
correct.
about your choices and you really try and invest in getting better at your organizational agility, it doesn't make it easy, but
No.
it is a pathway through this environment that we're all wrestling.
I think you're spot on. The vision that comes to mind for me is if you don't do that, right, you'll end up being a company. There's that movie, everything, everything all at once, everywhere. However it goes, everything.
I know what you're, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. The
It sounds like
multiverse
my
of the
job
movie.
description. Yeah. Okay.
Well, it sounds like the strategy of a number of companies, right? It's like, we want to do it all, we want to do it now, and we want to do that. Oh, and we want to do this. And can you do it yesterday? Sort of thing. And if so, you do have to cherry pick, and know your swim lanes. And I think that's the strength here, is know your swim lane, know what you're going to chase after. And I love what you said there, is know when you're going to make those hard decisions, in a certain space. So a question for you then, given that we've both got a little bit more gray hair than other people, is what skills do you think the next generation of ecosystem leaders need to thrive?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, I think I would say the part that, all right, so having both worked directly in running an ecosystem, but then also worked with lots of partners who have their own ecosystems. I've been an ISV in other people's ecosystems. Um, I would say one of the things that is maybe my pet peeve is it's very easy for either individuals or frankly entire companies to get focused on individual partnerships. They think about like it's almost like a point to point thing of like, okay, there's me as this, platform and you as a partner, and we're going to make something work for the two of us. Don't get me wrong, there is a layer in the relationship in which like having a one-to-one relationship, and investing in that, and that's a wonderful thing. The place where it becomes problematic for me is when people sort of just look at each one of these in their own sort of siloed thing, and they're not really looking at the interaction effects for better
Yeah,
or worse,
yeah.
across the rest. And so to me, if like you really want to be in ecosystems, the key word there is the system.
Mhm.
And so like, I don't know, this is a bit nerdy, but the idea of system dynamics, to me is like one of the things as an ecosystem leader, you really want to understand that like, hey, just because I pull this lever here and it has this immediate first order effect there, if I really want to be strategic about the ecosystem, I've got to be thinking like, okay, well, what are the second order effects, that are going to happen to that? What are the third order effects? Because particularly once you start doing this at speed and scale, those second order effects, those third order effects, they start to happen. And if you haven't sort of factored that into, the strategy, of how you're building those individual partnerships, you quickly find yourself like suddenly like fighting a whole bunch of fires. Like, wait a second, I did this here, but then this other thing over here like exploded.
Yep,
What happened?
yep.
So look at it as the system. That's my
Yeah,
only
definitely,
advice.
definitely. I really love that. It's that butterfly ripple effect. It's the chess player. It's two or three moves ahead. we used to talk a lot about the power of three, right? So instead of that one-on-one, it's like, who's the next layer involved in that, or out further. I really love that thinking. So yeah, next generation folks, if you are listening, think further, think wider. Use tools like ChatGPT to get that 360-degree view to just go through the next iteration. I really love that piece of advice there, Scott. That's fantastic. What is one tool? By the way, you're not allowed to say ChatGPT. I'm now ruling that out for everybody. Otherwise, it's going to be a very, very boring series of questions on this one. As we wrap up, what is one tool you can't live without?
Okay, so it won't be just ChatGPT. It would be, Claude and
All
Gemini
right.
and Perplexity. I've got the whole like suite of them at this point.
Shebang.
Um, yeah, no, I mean it's funny I mean the work I do right now, which is mostly about engaging and explaining things, to people. Yeah, the tool set is actually still quite dull. Like I do more coding in PowerPoint than at the point in time, Vibe Coding is able to just take my PowerPoint and translate it into software. Yes, it's going to be an amazing, probably next month. I do love, I'm like, I know we're recording this here in Riverside. Like a lot of these technologies around like being able to capture, whether it's webinars or podcasts or video, things like it's amazing. It's getting better and better without being a professional video editor to be able to like, do really good job with this stuff. Those are the sorts of AI tools that I really, I really think there's a huge unlock here of being able to augment people who are still in the driver's seat, of what it is they want to create, what it is they want to actually engage the market around. But for either questions of time, skill, or money, they were very constrained in how they could do that and how ambitious they could be in how they did it. And these AI tools just sort of keep like expanding the range of what an individual is capable of doing. And we're still early. So yeah, it's
We
exciting time.
are, and that's super exciting. I mean, I look at my kids. I've got an 18-year-old and a 13-year-old. 18-year-old's about to head off to university, and I'm like, the world you're going into is fundamentally different to the one I'm in, and nothing is impossible to you today, right? Like it's just not. And so it's super, super exciting and fantastic. Scott, this has been a wonderful conversation. We could go on for ages, and maybe I'll have to have you back for another round. But thank you so very much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Excellent. Folks, that's the end of this episode. I have more guests lined up. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. I'll get that out eventually in the right order. But thanks very much, and I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.